Hi guys, it's France. I am still playing in my heavy watercolor handmade art journal for this new journal on Monday, week 62. And the first layer is a layer of paper towel that I've been using to mop up excess Dilutions ink. I often get the question if it's not wasting ink to spray that much of it and then mopping it all up using a paper towel. Well, as you can see, if you keep that paper towel aside, leave it to dry, it will give you a fun and colorized paper to work with. So by gluing this down using Décopatch glue, I already have a texturized, colorized surface to play on. As it is Dilutions ink, it is water soluble, so I have to be very careful with what I'm applying on top of it. That's why I'm only using a very tiny bit of Décopatch glue on top of it to make sure it will stay down, because I don't want my Dilutions to bleed all around on the paper towel. There it is, a fun surface to work on. This is a 2012 Moleskine journal, agenda, that I'm not using anymore, of course, but it still has some interesting pages that don't have any writing on them, so I can use these now. I'm using an AK Success sponge to give it a bit of an interesting edge, and as my paper is too fragile, it's easier to punch 3 pages at the same time instead of one by one. And now that this is done, I can start colorizing it using Distress ink. I'm just going in with some vintage photo, using a blending tool, not being very careful on how I'm applying it. And now that this is done, I'm going to spray some water, because it will make my paper, it will change the texture of the paper and make it a bit more crunchy. It's quite a delicate paper, and this way it would get a bit stronger. And then drying it. This is all done using nothing but vintage photo Distress ink. Now going into my treasure box to get some interesting shapes to stamp with. And I'm simply stamping using my vintage photo Distress ink, but I'm also going a bit in the water, as you can see on the side, to make the stamping bleed just a little bit, and doing the same with bubble wrap. Now I also want to add a bit of text stamping. This is a Paper Artsy mini stamp. It's the Mini 30. And it's a very tiny manuscript stamp. Again, just stamping with the vintage photo Distress ink. And now I can fit it on my page. I want to keep the days visible, as these are agenda pages, so I'm ripping them down so that I can have every day visible. Putting everything together using my tiny attacher. And then starting to play with the other side. Now I got some leftovers on my table, This is Tim Holtz mini die mannequin. It was cut out of craft basil, and I kept the piece from which I did cut it out. And the other piece is the top of a tag that I cut off because I wanted to use it on a card and it was too big. This is a very fun tape, and it has some cool butterflies on it, and I thought I wanted to use that one underneath the mannequin, but you will see later on that after all I didn't like it all that much once it was glued down. This is again one of those pages where I didn't know how I wanted to start, but had no clue on how to go from there. Again, Tim Holtz die cut. This is the mini matchbook set. Again in basil craft, and again I'm colorizing it with a vintage photo distress ink. The video is about 12 minutes, and it took me ages to get it done just because I didn't know what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to do something, but I kept looking at my page for the longest of time, not knowing what I wanted to do next. So it happens to me too. And then adding a bit of journaling inside my matchbook set on a leftover piece of the paper I made earlier on. Another paper artsy mini stamp. This is the 29, and it has some fun old stamp prints on it. As you can see, I'm digging up a lot of leftovers that are on my desk. I thought I wanted to use that Tim Holtz ticket, but in the end I did it. Another leftover, this is gauze I used last week for one of my paper artsy offerings, and I didn't use it in the end, so I can use it today. Adding a bit of gesso over dilution stencil to bring more of the white on the right side of my page. And I'm simply using a very cheap makeup sponge to get it on there. The other piece of white you can see lying on my left spread is also a leftover of gauze, on top of which I applied a layer of paper artsy grunge paste. And I thought it looked fun sticking out from underneath the agenda pages. I'm adding my wording using an American Crafts alphabet, and you'll see that I am searching on how I want to put it down, because it's not the only word I want to have down there, so I need to make room for the rest of it. I do like the contrast between the vintage looking craft paper, the blue popping background, and that funky alphabet. Although it's a sticker, it's a sticker alphabet, I'm adding a bit of glue to make sure everything will stay down, because my book is getting quite wonky. also adding a bit of distress ink. It's simply vintage photo again on the edges. But I do have some Décopatch glue on there, which acts as a seal. So to make sure I won't have any brown fingers when going to my book, I'm spraying a bit of water on a paper towel and taking the excess away. And then just doodling a bit with a Uniball pen on the edges. Keeping it quite simple today. As I also have a Bow Bunny sticker sheet next to me, I'm adding 2 little stickers on my page. Last thing to do is add the rest of my wording so that it makes sense instead of just having the word clearly on there. I hope you liked today's page. See you back next week. Have a happy one. Ta-da!